Okay, so I'm Nigel Mason. I'm a professor in the UK, currently at the University of Kent. And I give several of these talks about applying for fellowships to various training networks and so on that we've had over the years. So what I'm going to do in the next 20-25 minutes is take you through a sort of little bit of a guide about fellowships, both from the perspective of you, but also from the perspective of the people who referee fellowship proposals. And we have one guest today, a good colleague of mine, Professor Ilko Bald, who was very successful recently in obtaining one of the Europeans' major awards, an ERC fellowship. So you all may have ideas about what makes a successful proposal, and some of those may be right and some of those may be different. But what does make a good proposal is, first of all, the important thing to say is there is no magic formula. If we could all write to a formula, then everybody would be successful. The award of a fellowship depends upon yourself, and we'll come on to what you've got to show, but it also depends upon the type of funding and the funder. There are many, many fellowships now across Europe and indeed across the world that you can apply for. Some are national, some are international, but they all have their own sort of guidelines and everything else, and you must read those. So it's no good thinking if you write one fellowship proposal, you can just copy it over to another funder. You've got to really understand what the funder is looking for and what the funding is trying to do. And that also depends upon who's refereeing it, how they're refereed, and by who. And you should always be thinking about what's the referee going to think about when they see my fellowship. So if we're looking at the funders, there are several broad categories. Most countries, except perhaps some of the very small ones, have a national funding agencies that will aim to fund fellowships, particularly for early career scientists. On top of that level, here in Europe, we're very fortunate with the European funding, what they call the Horizon Programme funding, now moving into a whole new stage with something called Horizon Europe. And you will see things called the Marie Curie Fellowships or the ERC, which is the primary funding agency for pure academic style research. But there are other fellowships around, some of which are open to people from all nationalities. Some of these are charities, so if you're particularly more moving towards some of the more medical aspects, but not just that. Indeed, in the physical sciences, there are also agencies, companies, and so on. Like in the UK, we have one called Leverhulme, which is a very successful fellowship program open to everybody around the world. The Royal Society in Europe, Humboldt and so on in Germany. All these agencies, not the national funding agencies, but agencies with their own funding that will look upon it. But every single one has their own agenda and their own goals. So just to look at those in a little bit, in the national agencies, they predominantly aim to meet some kind of government agenda. So it goes from the politicians to the civil servants, and often they're looking at local needs. So it's very important that if you're applying for a fellowship in, say, Germany, and you're not in Germany, that you learn a little bit about what they want from the host. A strong sign case is important. Now, in national agencies, most referees are national. So if you're applying for a German fellowship, you will probably be refereed by researchers in Germany. If you apply to the UK, it will predominantly be a UK referee. If you're in one of the smaller countries, they do tend to send them out more widely. Why is that important? Is because referees who know you and know your work will referee it in a different way from somebody who doesn't. And what they will know in your national agency is they will know your research group. They will know the people you're working with. So you need to know those too. At the European level, we're still looking for scientific excellence in all these programs, but often, sometimes the science is not the only requirement. Sometimes it's only up to 40% of the marks, because there are other aspects of these fellowships. It's about building Europe's capacity. And indeed, in the Horizon Europe program, there's a very good example of that. that they've made a very special effort to try and get early career researchers to apply to those states which are what they call less represented, so widening participation states. So if you apply for a Marie Curie proposal in one of those states, you actually get 2 bites of the cherry. You will get the standard refereeing with everybody competing with people who are applying to go to institutions in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Britain, and so on. But if you're applying to, say, a country like Hungary or the Czech Republic or Poland or the Balkan states, they're going to, if you may not get through that top list on the first funding, they have a separate stream of funding for people who are applying to those countries. And that's a political decision to try and encourage young researchers in Europe to go to those countries. If it's a charity or an agency, read carefully their agenda. You can't just submit a proposal you put into the EU or the national agency, because every one of those agencies has got something particular that they want. So you really do need to read those rubrics before you put it in. So some golden rules. The first one is obvious, but we all do it. Give yourself time to write a proposal. There is actually a correlation between the number of bids failing and the time they're submitted. And about last minute bids do fail much more than ones that have had long time scans to do it. So particularly for you, if you're a younger researcher, it's the first time you're actually writing a proposal, then what is Eurospeak? It means you have to understand what the Commission wants and be able to quote back at them and understand Euro words. There are key words that they have, which you might not know what they are, so ask. When you're writing a proposal, one of the most critical things is to get it read and commented on. I've written, I don't know, probably hundreds of proposals. When we write the proposals, even today, I'm well aware that I may not got my message over. I see what I want to see. Send it out to somebody else. Get somebody else to read it. But they have to be a critical friend. There's no, having a person who says, well, that really is quite good. That might help you sort of feel better about yourself, but it's not actually helping you. You want people who are going to read it and say, actually, that's not clear. What are you trying to say there? No one's perfect. Always get people to read it. And for you starting to write proposals, as I say, those first 2 things, you need even more time to write the proposal to get it right. And you need probably even more mentoring to do it. So do give yourself time. And we like to talk about the 5 W's as the key points in any proposal. What do you want to do? That has to come out very clearly in any scientific proposal, and that includes a fellowship. The next one is, why do it now? Often people will ask, well, okay, why is it the right time for going into the idea that you've got? What makes it topical? What's the grand challenge and the big question? You will always now find number 3. What will the results and the impact be? Increasingly, government agencies and so on, European proposals want to see that this is going to lead to something else, and that might be an application or whatever. ERC is still very much focused on pure science, thank goodness, but it will still want to know, and maybe Ilko will say something about that later, about how by doing this, you're going to do something that's transformative. It's going to take us on to the next stage. The next 2 points are also key for fellowships. Where do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it at the institution you want? That for scientific reasons, not because you happen to live there and be settled. There must be a good reason of why that's the best group of people to work with, particularly if things like the Marie Curie, where you have to go to somewhere different. And the 5th one is perhaps the most difficult one for a lot of people to write, particularly early career ones. Explain to the reviewer why you are the person to do it. Why have you built up the skill set to do this fellowship? And for that reason, you need to be careful about who you're writing for. There are basically 2 types of referee. There is the expert referee who has got the keywords they've given to the reviewing agency to say, it got meteorites. So they get a proposal that comes in and says, yeah, this is about analyzing meteorites. This person is clearly an expert in meteorites. We'll send them to them. But most panels consist of the people who are the experts in your field, but all the other people on that one are not experts in your field. They may be more generalists, so they might not have written down meteorites, they might have just written down space science. But you've often got to convince them that your fellowship proposal is good, as well as the expert. which means you've got to think about how you put it over to them. And so the question then is, how do people referee? Well, everybody I'll tell you how people referee. I probably do 2 or 3 referees a week, either a scientific paper or a grant or something else. And when do I do it? I often do it home in the evening. I often do it in the weekend because I'm busy. And if I get a fellowship call, I might have 10, 15, even 20 I've had proposals to referee. So the ones that are going to be more favored by me are the ones that catch my attention. The ones that will score badly are the ones that are badly written. I can't find the information I like, and you annoy me because I can't find the information I want. So how do you annoy me? Complex text with lots of acronyms that I don't know what they are. Lots of poor layout. I'm going to be reading this probably on a laptop screen, so I don't like 8-point, I can't read. I don't like lots of abbreviations. And sometimes people like to come up with clever English. If English is not your first language, be careful about using English acronyms and slogans and so on. I have a colleague who likes to pick up a kind of expression. And when he's got it, he wants to use it in everything. And sometimes it is not appropriate in some of the terms that he's used it in. So if English is not your first language, keep it simple. Don't try and use the vernacular. The most annoying thing for me, even if you've got a nicely written proposal and everything, is I can't find the message. Very often, you will write a whole section, and only at the end of the section will you tell me what the answer to the question I'm looking for. Why is this research important? I will get the whole section of the background and history of the area and papers that's been done, and I'm crying out to say, yeah, but why is it relevant? What are they trying to do? And 3 pages in, at the end of the 3rd page, I get it. And that's annoyed me by that stage. It's a fellowship. A fellowship is about you. So demonstrate that you know the field. Okay? Demonstrate that you know the field. And that means putting in references. And references are key. And they also are very much better if you put in your references to work that you've done to show your expertise. And often a picture or a chart illustrates your point better than loads of words. And we do like pictures. And if the whole concept of your project can be shown in a nice diagram, I will have that in my mind. And again, the non-expert referee will probably pick that up more than trying to read all the texts. They'll just pick up the abstract and they'll pick up that idea and they get the concept from a nice diagram. Fellowship, those rules apply to all grants, but fellowships are different because they're personal, they're about you. So you in a fellowship are selling yourself as much as the science. Often, and in nearly all fellowship proposals, and others can comment, Ilko can comment, there is a comment about being independent. The fellowship is the stepping stone often towards you becoming an independent researcher. And if you have staying at the same institution you were trained, then people will often question, is this person independent? Or has the professor said, you know, X, Y, would you like to write a fellowship proposal? And the ideas didn't come from you. They came from that person who's really just trying to keep you in the group because they know you're a damn good person. They like to keep you in the group. And this is another route to getting you to stay in the group. It means that often people tend to write things like we rather than I. It's you you're talking about. And we don't often, and again, it's a cultural thing. A lot of people don't like thinking about talking about themselves and writing I. Oh, don't like writing it like that. But in a fellowship, you must own it. I often like to see the word I. It's about leadership. We want to know how this fellowship is going to develop your career and where you're going after the fellowship. And the host supporting you. How is the host supporting you, not the award? Often there is a section there about the host. It's no good having a sort of generic thing saying, yeah, of course, we'll give them some, we won't power charge from Ben's fees and they can come into the lab. Fellowship proposals are much stronger if it shows that the host really wants and values having you as a fellow and explains what they're going to do to support you during that fellowship. So the abstract is very important. Many on the panel don't read more than that. They've got some proposals to read in detail, they've got the rest, and they'll be listening to the expert. What they will do is they will read the abstract. And that abstract is therefore very important, clear about what you're asking for and why. And most people write I'm amazed still, and I've just seen it classically this morning in a meeting I was in, where people write the abstract right at the end. In the last, they've been planning this proposal for 2 months. They write the abstract in the last week. I'll do it the other way around. The work plan. One of the questions which often comes up, particularly for young people, is they try to do too much in their fellowship. They promise too much because they feel they're going to try to do everything. And therefore the referees say, but this is fine, a good idea, but they can no way, it's just not feasible. It's overclaim, it's too much. And that's because people want to say we're going to really solve a problem and they want to really do it. It's got to be realistic. On the other hand, it isn't just going to be derivative, it's just doing the next one little step on from your PhD. So it's a delicate balance you need to get. Also think carefully about the resources you've got. If you get the resources wrong, you can't deliver the project. So you have to talk to somebody maybe more experienced about what you actually need, what consumables you're going to need. So that you can't start the project and then find that you budgeted £1,000 for, I don't know, geophoresis or something, and it costs you 5,000 a year. What are you going to find the other 4,000? Where's it going to come from? You have to justify it. So talk about that. So as I say, fellowship rules. It's an independent fellowship to continue research that you've developed. It's got to be about you. Write the abstract describing the research you propose to do. Do that early so you've got the concept, and then do the 5 Ws. What do you want to do? Why do you now? What's the result going to be? Where do you want to do it? And why are you the person to do it? So that's that. I'm now going to turn quickly to the interview. So, and thanks for some slides here from here in Kent. Now, most fellowship schemes nowadays contain an interview. Marie Curie doesn't, but many others do, most do. And why do we have an interview? Well, the interview's got a few things to do. It's checking your CV, it's ensuring the application is written by you. It's to ascertain the skills that you have, particularly the communication skills. Sometimes, if it's a fellowship in an institution and the institutional fellowships, for example, it's to really look at the human interactions. Do they think you'd fit? If it's like a job application. You can all ask yourselves, how many interviews have you had? I would hope that most people submitting an independent fellowship have probably had more than one interview, probably between 1 and 5. Some of us have had dozens. The question is, what did you do after the interview you had? What did you feel about it afterwards? Did you get a feeling that you got the job or the fellowship? And if so, why? But more importantly, were there things that you can learn from, particularly if you failed? If you go for one of these fellowships and you don't get it, and then you apply for another one and you get another interview, think about what happened. So Ilko will talk about his experiences on the ERC when you're called for the interview. My guidance is, before you do, read your application again. Make sure you know everything in it, because if you're going to get asked on it. Again, think about what you're asking for and why. But the most important thing when you get a face-to-face interview, or even a Teams interview, as they have been in the last 18 months, and probably will be for a good 6 months to come, is you've got to be positive. So people still like you to dress smartly. Shaking hands, I know culturally some places not, but some people do like it. But most importantly, smile. Maintain eye contact with the people in the room and try and relax. And most people speak too quickly. So calm, think about the questions. Try to avoid fidgeting. Just you're being there because they value you. They wouldn't have invited you for interview if they didn't think that you were capable of getting the fellowship or getting the job. So you've won that battle. What they want to do is see if you're the best person for the job. They're not not questioning you being there. You are there on merit. So think about how you present to yourself, etc. And these are some of the questions that might come up. What makes you suitable for this fellowship? Where do you see yourself in 2 or 5 years' time? Why are you the person to conduct this research? Why is this research timely? And what's the impact of this research on your community or, for example, in the public? These are standard questions you're going to get in most fellowships. Have answers ready for them, think about them. There are also some competency-based questions. Describe a situation where you had to show some leadership. If this fellowship is about the next generation of leaders, it is a fair question for panel members to ask. Show some example where you've taken leadership of position. You might be setting up a research group. So how did you overcome a difficult decision? Running a research group's got difficulties. Did you get an example of that? How did you overcome an obstacle? Maybe if you're getting a $1.5 million grant, maybe some question about financial expertise that you've had. How do you work with others to solve a problem? These are what we call competency-based questions, perfectly reasonable questions to ask you, and they're ones that often people get a bit stuck with. Best thing is to think of an answer and think of a classic of an example. So you describe the situation, you focus on what the task is, you discuss the action that you took and how you achieved that. If it was a group task, you could, for example, define your own role in the group. Give concrete results. Try and be positive about an example that you're giving to that type of question. And then they'll ask you at the end, you always get this question at the end, have you got any questions for us? And most people become the goldfish. What could you ask about? You could ask about, if it's a fellowship, what training are they going to give you? What's the career development that might be arranged as part of the fellowship? Often true in national schemes particularly. What about the opportunities for other funding? National awards may only pay your salary, but they might say, well, you can now apply for a grant to the national agency when we give you this fellowship. So you've got some fellowships that are only your salary, some that might be the whole project. If you're moving from one country to another, what about removal expenses? What about travel home allowances? What about family support if you're moving your family? Have some of these questions asked so that you thought about what the fellowship process means. As I say, here are some other questions you can ask. What's your career path? Can you give training to programs? What's the work culture? Those are other sort of questions you can ask. I'll leave those in the slides. And then following up. The interview will probably let you know when you know the result. If they haven't, ask. And then after the interview, go away and just make some notes on the questions. Think about the questions they asked you. Think about what you could have done better. Because if you don't get it this time, you may find the same questions next time and you've got some reflection. And then I'll finally just say that, of course, we are in a different world now. We are now not meeting face to face. So the last year, all the interviews for this year's fellowships I've been involved in have all been online, either by telephone or now increasingly that is video interviews using Skype or Zoom or Teams. That's a great advantage when you're probably interviewing people out in Japan or somewhere to come. Please make sure that you know how to use the system which works. So if you haven't used Teams before, for example, try it out beforehand. I'm sorry, you saw sometimes things go wrong. Zoom suddenly decides to do an update like it did for me just at the beginning of this, no idea why. I don't get thrown by it. The difference between normal interviews is that when you're doing it online, you don't have that eye-to-eye contact. You can't read the body language, which might tell you, you can, if you can see people getting fidgety on the panel, you've gone on for too long. Somebody might be signaling, trying to get you to stop and move on. You can't do that so easily necessarily on Zoom. Most people speak much more quickly into a computer than they do in front of somebody. See how you look. I've got myself set up now. I've now got my Europlanet background. I don't know why it didn't come up before. I've got the computer on a platform because if it wasn't on the platform, I could be too low, or you might not see me. So practice with your camera to see what you look like. Check what your background is, and then if you are doing it from home, make sure you're not getting interrupted by the family, the cat. My cat always joins me in interviews, as some people know. So finally, as I said, there is no magic formula. Most of us will fail. We will all fail. We fail in grants, we fail in fellowships, we fail in job applications, because it's inevitable. Only one person can get most jobs, and for fellowships, it's a finite number. But if you don't try, you can't win. If you don't buy the ticket, you can't win the lottery. Good proposals and well-prepared interviews maximize your chances. And the most important thing in both the interview and the proposal is be clear in what you want to do, why it is important, what will you deliver, and I should also add to that, why you are the right person to do that. I'll take some questions afterwards, but I'm going to just first of all ask my colleague Ilko if he's there and ready. He's got one slide to show, and he's been through this more recently than me in fellowships. I've just gone for job interviews. He's gone for fellowship interviews. So Ilko, you'd like to give us a little bit of a guide of your experiences with the ERC, which of course you were very successful.
Yes, thank you very much. So I want to share just quickly one slide. I already, here it is. So I already introduced myself while Nigel was absent. And yeah, so just very quickly. So the reason why I'm here is that I actually got an ERC Consolidator Grant. So all that Nigel explained, I was going through, and I can fully support all of this. I got the Consolidator Grant in 2018 from the call 2017. And in ERC is a kind of is a bit special. I mean, every program is a bit special, so you have to go through the details if you're interested in this. But also for ERC, this is a two-step proposal, a two-step process. So you actually, in this case, you actually have two written proposals. These are called B1 and B2. The B1 is a short proposal, and this short proposal is focusing a lot on your CV. So you have to write a lot about yourself, and then just a short summary of your project. And then there is this B2 proposal. And the B2 proposal is the long proposal where you're just describing your project in much more detail, about, I don't know, 15 pages or so. And the special thing about the ERC process is that in the beginning, only the short proposal will be evaluated by the panel. And if they decide that based on this B1 proposal, they consider you good enough, then they are inviting you for an interview. And at the same time, and only then, they are reading the long proposal, the B2 proposal, and this is then also sent out to external referees. So only in this case, you are refereed by external referees. And as far as I know, this is not 100% sure. They are sending this out to around maybe 12 reviewers, and they are asking for their comments. A lot will reject this question, but some will provide a review. And then depending on how many accept this invitation, you will then later get comments on this. And then you will have the interview. And at the interview, you will have the possibility to reply to questions by the panel. And they will probably also ask a lot of the issues that are raised by the referees. So what is very important, as Nigel pointed out, is this is a personal fellowship. So in the case of the ERC, the excellence, the scientific excellence, is the only point that should be addressed. So you need to be scientifically excellent. And you have to develop your own ideas. And what is very important in the case of ERC is that you always have to present that your research that you're proposing is high risk, high gain. So they don't want you to present incremental research, but it should be research where you have a high gain. But on the way, there could be, of course, a high risk, and you have to address all this, how you mitigate the risk and so on. But it should be a big idea. And something that also Nigel mentioned, but I want to emphasize this point because I think from what I heard from other reviewers and referee reports is that your own independence is extremely important in this respect. So the referees are specifically asked to judge how independent they think you can develop your ideas. So this is very important because this you have to start very early in your career, that you should develop independent ideas and try to show this. So for example, by publishing papers where you are the corresponding author, for example. I mean, this you have to discuss with your supervisors, but this is something that is important, that you somehow demonstrate that you are independent. You can also apply for other grants to fund yourself. This is also something where you can demonstrate that you're independent. And these issues are very important. So some people say that you cannot win an ERC grant without having published in Nature or Science. But I can tell you that this is not true, because I have never published in Nature or Science. But I have seen people who published in Nature or Science, but have never got an ERC grant, because the referees, they considered the work that was published in Science was more affiliated or assigned to the supervisor and not so much to the research itself. So therefore, this independence, I think, is a very important point. And just to let you know how I was writing my proposal, I mean, everybody is different and everybody has their own style of working. But I tried to prepare this written proposal very carefully. And so I started around 6 months before the deadline. And I was thinking hard about the scientific concept. And something that I did that helped me a lot was that during the writing process, I was actually, first of all, presenting these ideas to my own group, but also to other groups that I'm friend with. So I asked them to give them a seminar and presenting the scientific concept that I wanted to develop there. And then I got a lot of feedback. And this was very helpful, because I asked them for critical questions. So, I mean, the typical questions such as like why are you doing this? And isn't it easier to do it this way? And this kind of feedback is very, very helpful. And I did this during the preparation of the written proposal, but I also did this during the interview phase. So this is what I did to prepare this. And then the interview, this is also kind of special. In the case of ERC, you have to give typically a very short presentation, and this depends on your panel. This can be just a 1-minute presentation. This can be a 10-minute or 15-minute presentation. I had to give a 10-minute presentation. And then as a following these presentations, you have to answer questions for about 15 minutes. And this time is very strict. So you can see that, of course, in 1 minute or 10 minutes, you cannot present all of the scientific ideas, but you have to be short and concise, and you have to be very self-confident. And this is something that you also have to prepare very well. So I can tell you that the 10 minutes presentation for the ERC interview was, in my case, the presentation that I prepared the most careful in my life so far. So it took me more than 1 month to really work on this. And I was also practicing with colleagues. I was getting help. And I can tell you that, for example, Nigel was also helping me a lot here. And preparing this carefully is also very important. And then when you're doing this, in the case of the ERC, you have a stopwatch in your bag that is just counting backwards, and all the panelists, they see this, but you're not seeing this. So this is creating a lot of stress. So therefore, it's very important to practice your presentation a lot of times, so that you just know this by heart. And so this is just in a nutshell what I can tell you as a personal experience about writing and also getting this. But I can offer you that if you're planning to submit a proposal for an ERC grant, that I will be very happy to share more experiences and to support you. And you can contact me. And I can support you as good as I can, especially when it comes to an interview. So I think then some personal experiences can be very helpful here. So just feel free to contact me if you are thinking about applying for an ERC grant. And if you have any question, just let me know.
Thank you, Ilko. And thank you for that offer. I do have another colleague, Natalie Carrasco, who got an ERC project on Titan and Atmosphere Titan. Unfortunately, she would have spoken to us today, but she's actually delivering her keynote talk at the AARNA conference as we speak. So that's why she couldn't do it today. There are some questions already in the chat, so I will just read them out, and then they say also, Ilko, please comment as well. There's one question saying, is it considered premature if we ask example of details of coverage relocation costs for a position grant fellowship that we don't have already won? No. If you're going to be moving institutions, you should know some of those things. I personally prefer to have those discussions earlier because you might turn us down. You might decide that if you don't know those things, that might be another big issue, and you've got to go back and have that discussion. It might already be in the proposal, except for Marie Curie, for example, has it. But I think if you're talking about that, or you're talking about what facilities you've got when you've got there, it shows that you've done some thought about, well, positively about going there. Ilko, do you want to comment on that?
Yes. Sorry, I was just reading the other question about the first author papers.
Yeah. The second question, if you see it in the chat, is what's a good number of first author papers to show scientific independence? Ilko, would you like?
Yes. So this is something that of course you cannot answer in detail. I mean, the point is, of course, you always must be better than your peers, right? I mean, when there is a certain number of proposals, the panel members they will just pick out the best ones. So you need to be better than the others. But in total, I mean, it's not only about the number of first author papers. So it's also the quality of the papers. So if you are publishing in high impact factor journals, then it's better than in low impact factor journals. So this is one thing, and then it depends on where you publish, in which scientific field you are publishing. So it's important for ERC, for example, to develop an own idea that you have not done before, but at the same time, it's clear that you are capable of doing this. And this you have to demonstrate by your publication list, of course. And therefore, it will be good if, I don't know, you're applying a certain technique that you have published before on this. And then, of course, it depends also on the program. So the ERC has different stages, and the starting grant is the first stage that you can apply for as a postdoc, up to 7 years, I think, after the PhD. And it really depends on your PhD age. So how many papers do you have from your PhD, and how many years do you have as a postdoc? And I think to have a couple of first author papers from your PhD, and then, I don't know, 1 or 2 papers from your postdoc career per year would be fantastic. But it really depends on your field and the technique that you're doing and the impact factor. So it's not easy to answer.
I think that's the point. Ilko's made a good point. It does depend on your discipline and your field. It also depends upon sometimes how the discipline works. So obviously, we're looking in this particular community at the space science. I mean, if you are a member of a paper which might be on one of the big space missions, it is unlikely that you potentially will be the first author. But what you can do, and that might be a nature or a science paper, what you do have to do is to explain your role in it. You might have been the lead in a particular aspect of a part of that proposal. You've got to make it clear. The other way of showing your independence, and I think Ilko is a good example of this, is where you kind of show that you've done some design of projects yourself. So, for example, you might get the opportunity to be a supervisor of a master's student or an undergraduate student, and a paper will come out and they will be first author. But maybe that's an opportunity where you get the idea of developing an idea. Ilko's been part of a community where we have a lot of short-term exchanges between groups. And there's a program called the Cost Action. In the Europlanet, it is, for example, in using the facilities. So if you could write a proposal to use a facility to do a particular experiment, which was your idea, then that is showing some independence, that you created the idea, you created the network. You might go and visit that group and then decide, oh, this is quite a good group to work with, and they've got some facilities, and I want to build the use of that facility into my proposal. But you will be able to articulate, not only in the proposal, but particularly in the interview, that you created that link, that it was by you going there or at a particular conference where you picked up. Those are the things that people are looking for. They're looking at where you've initiated something, that you've shown that you had an idea and you could follow it through. So do take advantage of those. So when you're on your CV and it has that little bit about private funding, you know, if you say I got funded to go on 3 field trips using Europlanet funding to go to Ethiopia or go to Greenland, or I've run a whole series of synchrotron experiments or a series of ion beam experiments. I applied for that time, not my supervisor, not my professor who I worked the postdoc with. I applied. Those are the sort of things that give the referee the opportunity to write in the box, has this person shown independence or capability of independence, to evidence-base their argument. So always look out for those opportunities. And yes, you know, a good supervisor, knowing that you're going to apply for something, they'll think about the first author part. I don't need loads of hundreds of first author papers anymore. So it doesn't matter, you know, if I think that, and let's be honest, perfectly well, it's the postdocs and the PhD students who do the research in the lab, not me. I have no problem with them being first author. And I know that's going to help them in the future and so on as well. Ilko, do you want to come back at all about anything like that?
No, I think that's all that you can say about this. I think that's the most important things. Yes.
Okay. Do we have any more questions in the chat? Not at the moment. Does anybody? Is a PhD mandatory in order to apply for a fellowship, or most of the fellowships? I think the answer to that is probably yes. Most of them will state that. That's how most of them go. If it's a technology related fellowship, engineering, I'm talking about space engineering here, for example, then sometimes that's slightly different. But I think predominantly the system works on fellowships being postdoctoral stage. Any other questions we've got from people? That was in the Q&A. Have I missed any more? Callum, remind me. I don't think I've missed any. Oh, there's one here for about, so references annoy the referees. Don't quite know what you mean by that. When you're doing references, when you're referencing stuff, make sure you know the literature. So you might be unfortunate, and that the technique and the stuff you're doing and so on, a particular person has done that. If it goes to them and they found their work isn't referenced, yeah, they can get annoyed. I think the main thing is to show that the references are there to show that you've done a literature survey, you understand who's doing the work, you understand what the state of the art is, so that when you say that you're going to develop that work and go a step beyond, that it's based on the fact that you know the literature. A fellowship which basically aims to do something that's already been done before and the person hasn't looked at the literature, that would be bad. I mean, that would almost certainly fail, because it would feel that you hadn't done your work. So I think the critical thing that Ilko has said is he started to prepare it 6 months before. The deadlines for most of these things are annual. They are well known. They are often, they are usually at the same time of year. Marie Curie is changing a little bit around at the moment because of the delay in the launch of Horizon Europe. But yeah, take your time. And I think Ilko's described exactly what he did. He came up with a concept. He tested it. He tested it on people who worked with in the institution he worked at. And then I liked his idea that he actually said, oh, can I go and give a talk somewhere? Can I test it on another person? And then he had some people like myself, and I think he also had a professor in Denmark, David Field. We I think it's fair, Ilko, to say that we were critical friends, that, you know, we really critiqued it. We looked at the weaknesses, we were supportive, but we all both thought it was best if we actually told you that, you know, how we really felt and where we felt that a referee might pick something up. So it was quite an ongoing process, and it did take the 6 months, but you got it first time, didn't you, Ilko? So it is a lot of work.
Nigel, we have a request to go to the annoy slide. What annoys?
What annoys people? What annoys referees? There will be a copy of this whole presentation, and I guess we can add your slide in, okay, if you agree.
Yeah, sure.
So, and we'll post that on the Europlanet Society page.
Yeah, so I think this question is covered.
Yep.
Nigel, there was just a question about Eurospeak, to clarify what you mean by that.
Yeah, let me just go back in and share the screen again. Okay, so you should see how to annoy referees now, yeah? Can you see that slide? Yes?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Eurospeak is when, and it's not just Eurospeak, but it's more general. The European Union has reasons of why it wants to fund what it wants to fund. One of those things is about building capacity within Europe. And so you will find in some of these calls where you want to talk about the concept about pan-Europeanism, etc. As I say, the example I would give is the example of where if you apply for a Marie Curie proposal, you can apply to any of the countries in Europe which are funded to do that, or associated states like the UK. But they have now decided that they want to encourage researchers, bright researchers, to go to other countries to help them build their science capacity. So if you're applying to hold your fellowship in the Czech Republic or Hungary or Poland or I don't know, Portugal, then you have another opportunity. If the Marie Curie scores come down and you don't get funded in the first round because the excellence scores cuts off at something ridiculously high like 92.5, they are then going to take some of those proposals which are below that cutoff but are in these widening participation countries, and they're going to have an extra pot of money to help to fund some of those proposals to help build the capacity in those countries. And that is a deliberate policy thing. So what are they going to look for in your proposal? They're going to look and think about why you chose that country and why you might have to write a paragraph or two about how it's helping to build the capacity of the group that you're in. And the host institution will have to write something similar. So that's when you get into the kind of bit of what we call the Euro speak and so on as well. And there are terms across which they use, which aren't always, you know, obvious. What do you mean by impact? What do they mean by impact? You have to read them, and that's where you need a little bit of nuancing. But that's why you talk to people who have got experience of having refereed them. Anybody who's refereed for the ERC or the Marie Curie, they're the best people to go and talk to because they have done it. They know what they were told to look for, and they know how to score, and they can help you with what you're looking for. But I could equally say there's UK speak or there's Humboldt speak. Each funder will have some ideas of what they're looking for in the fellowship, and you've got to kind of talk to them back and explain to them that you're meeting their objectives, which are not just the pure science. They've got these other little bits which might be appropriate. So you've got to think about writing those in as well. But first up, excellent science and a good CV that shows that you're the person to do this project and that you can be an independent researcher. That's what nearly all these schemes are looking for.
Okay, there are about 5 minutes left. There are two questions, one from Duncan Mifsud. Are you allowed to, or is it a good idea to apply for multiple fellowships at once?
There's nothing to stop you except your amount of time that you have. I wouldn't recommend more than 2 at the same time or in the same window, i.e. within a month of each other, because it will split your resources, to split your time going across, and sometimes it's better to get the results of one fellowship, and if you don't get it, to read what they've said and work out what the weaknesses are. So you may find that they've identified a weakness in the science case that you wanted to do. Therefore, if you're going to rewrite that case, at least then you can build on the referee's problem. You can think about that weakness and correct it. It is not uncommon for people to apply for more than one. National agencies, often there are several calls, and fellowships are awarded, and they're not always taken up because the person's been offered another fellowship which they might decide preferential to the one that they've got. But yeah, I mean, but don't split your resources too much. I would say probably 2 at a time is probably maximum. I don't know. Ilko, did you apply for anything else apart from the ERC?
Well, not at the same time, but I think, I mean, you should be always transparent. So if you have the same project ideas that you submit to several funding agencies, then I think it will be good to mention that the same project is also applied for at a different funding agency, so that in case you get both, that you decide for just one. So I think this will be a good idea. So I had this once, but in the end I didn't get anything of this. But
some funders do have a box that says, are you applying for any other fellowship at the same time? I think that happens in the UK ones, where they ask that. Another question: there are grants for doctoral students. They're not called fellowships. No, that's right. I mean, there are awards for doing the PhDs and so on as well, but that's perhaps slightly different. And
there's one further question in the chat. Is it a disadvantage if the area of your proposal is different from the area of your PhD?
Okay.
Yeah, this is a tricky question. So there are different things to answer. So first of all, in some programs, this is a kind of requirement. So this is a good thing if you're not continuing with the same science. So this shows some kind of independence, so that and development. So you should further develop scientifically, and for this you need to also somehow change your subject. But at the same time, you need to be careful that this is not too much change, because if you do something completely different, then the referees won't see your expertise in this new field. And therefore, it's always a balance between change is good because you should develop, but you should not change too much so that people still believe that you are an expert in this field. So it's not easy to answer.
I think people evolve. I mean, Ilko is a good example. I mean, his fellowship has a lot of what I might call biology in it, DNA and stuff, but you're a physicist. So you do evolve, but he had learned the techniques as he went along. So the fellowship built along a pool of experience he got, and in the end, he chose a particular direction. And that's fine. And I think that actually strengthened his proposal a lot, because he also said what he didn't know in that proposal as well, and how by building a group he would bring people in with expertise, and he would have collaborations to help him go forward in an ERC. So yeah, there's not a simple answer to that. I think the key thing is that it's got to be believable that you can do whatever project that you say that you can do. It might be that you've done your PhD in a particular area. You then had the opportunity to visit a group, and you found something really exciting in that group. And that the reason you'd visited that group was because you were bringing some expertise to that group. But now what you want to do is to pick up some of the ideas from that group and develop it by bringing together some expertise you have and sharing it with your host. There is a section in some proposals that says, what is the advantage to you as an individual of going to that host, but also what is the advantage to the host in having you? So they're looking at what ideas you bring in as well as what you learn. That's also common in some of the UK projects where they try and twin people together. They're trying to look at a mutual benefit to you going there and earning some training, but you also producing some good things for the group that you're going to from the expertise you had. Okay, I don't see any more. Do you? And anything else in there? I'll stop sharing. Q&A, I think we've covered. No open questions. Chat. I think
So-
we've covered Tanya's. Yeah.
We've gone beyond the hour as well, or we're just
Okay.
over the hour.
Well, we've got the we'll put these slides up. As I say, Ilko, if you could send me yours, I'll add it onto the end of my presentation and we'll put it up. Ilko's email's on his slide, my email's on my slide. We're both very happy to talk to anybody who's got particular questions or wants some input. You've got Ilko's volunteering there. I might also ask, add another person, Natalie Carrasco. She's also willing to do it. As I say, she would have joined us today, but she's actually giving her presentation. And if you're looking for independence, that is another thing to put on your CV. Get to give some talks at conferences, you know. Tell your supervisor you'll do it rather than them, right? You know, get yourself out there and people might remember you from that, but do, and that's also good for practicing for interviews. So put yourself forward for giving talks at conferences. And if a group leader says, you know, it's a good thing for you to do, they really do mean it is a good thing for you to do. Don't be shy. You will need to do it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Nigel. Thank you, Ilko. We will, as well as the slides, will be putting a recording of this webinar onto the website. We have further webinars planned about collaborating with amateurs and writing impact sections for funding proposals. But if you have other ideas of things that you would like to see addressed, then I will drop a form on the website as well. So when you see the slides and you see the recording, you can also put in any ideas of things that you would like for further topics. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you at EPSC over the next couple of weeks and at future webinars.
Okay.
Bye-bye.